So there's a lot of confusion out there, and I always ask myself, how could these people be so confused? How could they be so wrong about some of this material? And what I found is something that I wanted to share with you is they don't know how to read the Bible. They're not reading the Bible. They're being told little pieces here and there. They're saying, okay, that's what it is. They're not necessarily checking it out. Or they look at the passage and say, okay, this is this. They associate what they just learned with that passage, and that's the way it is. And the people that tell this stuff, I mean, they're not their enemies. A lot of times they're family, friends, pastors. They're good people, so why wouldn't they believe them? Well, the reason why is because it comes from a theology. When you start, I live in 2025. I grew up in this town. I go to this church, and this is where you start. And people start to work backwards to the beginning. And when they come across things that don't line up with the way they think, they rationalize it. They call it something else. They say, it's this. So then they confound it and throw it into the spin zone there, and it comes out the other end, and boom, there you go. As long as you don't read any other part of the Bible, you'll notice that a lot of people will refer to Matthew. Matthew, 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 Matthew. And Matthew's very easy to manipulate because it's a little more obscure, just like Paul, just like Revelation. They're harder books to understand, so they're easier to manipulate. Reading the Bible when I was coming up, and I notice a lot of people when I talk to them, it's like being out in the universe. You're out there, there's no beginning, there's no end. It's just wide open space, man. And it's really confusing. And it really, really is. But there's good news. You can encapsulate it. This is how. This is how you read the New Testament. Okay? First of all, who's the Messiah here? Jesus. Jesus the Christ. Okay? No one else on this planet at that time had more authority than he did because God gave him his authority. Okay? And after we have Paul and a lot, Peter, they didn't have any more authority than Christ. Nor did they ever come up and say, oh, Christ was wrong, or hey, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be doing something different here, a little mistake here. Let me clarify what's going to happen now. None of that. The way it was said originally is the way it is. And it hasn't changed, and it's not going to change. Paul doesn't disagree with Jesus. I guarantee you that. Paul's not going to go against Christ. That's not his job. So we have Jesus. We have the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. The rest of it, people are coming back to Christ. They're taking certain passages and expounding upon them. Okay, there's a word for it I forget right now. So when you read, let's take the apocalyptic chapters, which are very, very popular, even if I've made videos on them because of their popularity, because they lead to other things that people are interested in, the end times. Let's take Matthew 24. Most people are familiar with it. There's a beginning. When is this temple going to be destroyed like you said it was? Now, Jesus starts off on a dialogue, and he puts forth a timeline. Rumblings and grumblings. Then there'll be tribulation. People will be brought up against judges and kings. Then the abomination of desolation, which in Luke says it's the Roman army. Then you have the coming of the Son of Man. And then that's it. The coming of the Son of Man is the end. And these rumblings and grumblings that they're told to look out for is the beginning. Now, in Mark 13, you have 4 people. Okay? Peter, John, Andrew, and James. 4 people. That's who he's talking to. He's not talking to a big crowd like they say in Matthew. He's not talking to a big crowd. It's not feeding the 5,000 and said, oh, hey, this is the Olivet Apocalypse. It was given later on, and it was given to 4 people after the incident at the temple where he said, you see these buildings, or you see this building, it's going to come down. Right after the widow and the mite story. Okay, 4 people. Jesus said, and this is the other end. This is the absolute end of the timeline that Jesus gave. One of you 4 will see all these things happen. Okay, you won't die before it happens. So at least one of them. So that means people. How long do they live back then? Let's just say 80 years old. Okay. By the time that person dies, whoever it may be, let's just say it's John, because it seems like that's the theme in the New Testament. John's the last person to die. Okay. And it's not something cute like, oh, John saw the revelation, so therefore he saw it, so therefore it happened. It's not one of those stories. I mean, literally before it all comes to fruition. Okay? The second John takes his last breath on this planet, that's the end. That's the timeline. So you have from when Jesus gave this speech to John. That's it. It has to happen in those times. You cannot take pieces out of it and move it around and turn it, oh, Jesus is going to come 2,000 years from now. You cannot do that because it's like a river, okay? And it's flowing. It's coming from your left, it's flowing towards you, and it's flowing off and to the right. It's going away from you, okay? Everything flows in this direction as an example. So when you read it, you'll see how it flows. It all flows when people like Paul come in and Peter and Paul come in, and they expound on certain things. You'll still notice it's still flowing along in that direction. If anyone says it's not flowing along with what Christ says, then they're lying. And it's easy to tell. That's what I'm saying. When you look at all 3 Gospels plus John, okay, all 4, but all 3, you'll notice in these Olivet and Apocalypse chapters that they all have to do with one another. And when someone tries to say in Matthew, well, this is where it stops, and then this part's going to happen in the future, all you have to do is go over to Luke, and you'll see that it doesn't. It's impossible. It cannot happen. I would even say, if you're reading Matthew or you hear a lot of Matthew this and Matthew that, stay away from Matthew for a while. If you're really going to start reading, read Luke, read Mark, read them both, then read John, okay? And once you got a good grasp of what they said, read the entire thing. If it takes you a year, it takes you a year, but read it. Then go back to Matthew. When you read Matthew, it will make a lot more sense. The things that they told you won't make any sense anymore because you'll see clearly from reading the other 2, okay? And this is why you're confused, because you just read Matthew and someone tells you this. But they're giving you a theology. They're giving you, oh, if you're a Catholic, they're going to give you the Catholic version. There is no version. There's no nothing. There's just the Gospels and reading the Gospels. I'm not giving you a theology here. I'm just telling you there is no theology. There's no nothing back then. Just you believe, you're a follower, you want to be a follower, and everything else. 2, you have a choice to make, either yes or no. And that's all that exists. Either you accept it, all of it, or you don't. So when you read, you can encapsulate it. It's like you're being taken out of the universe, and you have a beginning and you have an end. So now that when you're reading it, Jesus starts to give out his timeline. Again, the rumblings and grumblings, the tribulation. In Luke, it turns out the abomination of desolation, that was the Roman army describing the Romans surrounding Jerusalem in 70 AD. And then you have the coming of the Son of Man. Okay, that's the end. That's the telos. That's what it is. If you take Daniel, if you take all these Gospels, if you take Revelation, they all fit this pattern. They all fit this timeline. They all fit inside each other sequence-wise. It's all flowing, okay, in the same direction. So when you encapsulate it like this, you'll see that just like in towards the end, people say that's future, but they're not actually talking about anything future. And they're only doing that to substantiate some other part that they're trying to take out of context. They're trying. That's why that is what causes all the confusion. Is people taking things out of context. They take it and they put it over here. Well, you cannot do that. Once it's in that timeline, it's going. You can't take it out. You can't stop it. Can't anything. It starts. It ends. That's it. So to take anything out of context is out of place, and you'll start to see that if you read the whole thing. You'll start to see that it all flows towards the same direction. And when you take all three, when you become familiar, someone will say something, you'll say, well, that can't happen because, like in Luke 17, people will say, oh, that's about the future. Well, if you look at it and you go over to Matthew, it will say almost the same thing verbatim. It will talk about people on their housetops, people out in the field, and they run. Well, that's 70 AD, so that's not future. I mean, it's very easy to tell. Even in Luke 21, towards the end, I think it was 21:23. Pray that you'll have the strength to withstand all these things that are about to happen, okay? All the things soon to take place and to stand. And again, he's talking to 4 people here. Don't ever forget that. To stand before the Son of Man. That means he's going to come down and they will be in front of him. It's not metaphorical. People will just lie to you and say, oh, that's just metaphorical. No. Because when you take all of them and you put all the information together, it cannot happen. And when you read it like this, you'll see how easy it is. You'll start to see this pattern, this sequence. And that's how you need to read it. Read it according to what Jesus says. This. It has a pattern, has a timeline. He lays out the timeline, and there's a sequence. Everything happens in this sequence. Revelation, Daniel, I don't care what book. You put them together. They may not fit exactly, but you can put them together where this happens. You talk about the judgment. You go to Revelation, they have the judgment. Now, what about all the stuff in between? What about the dragons? What about, who cares? Because it fits in the middle of this timeline. It's not outside the timeline. The dragon doesn't get put in or released or put into a prison after Jerusalem comes. It's before. And it's before the judgment. Okay? You'll start to see it. You'll start to see this pattern. You'll start to see it encapsulated. And once you do that, it will not be confusing anymore. Okay? Just keep that in mind. People want to take things out of context. If you read it, you'll see that you can't take it out. You can't move things out of the timeline. It just doesn't work that way. And it's very, very easy to tell when people do that. Now, what happens when Paul says something? Oh, well, Paul and Jesus didn't agree on this. I don't think so. And even more, it's something that's sandwiched in between. So you have a beginning and you have an end. That is the in-between part. So you know the beginning and you know the end. You may not be so clear on all the stuff in the middle, but if you trust Jesus, if you listen to what he's saying and you believe that what he's saying is correct, you'll have the answer. No, you won't know. I still don't know every single little detail that people argue about. But really, honestly, it doesn't matter, for one. And two, if it does contradict something Jesus says, then it's wrong. Then you don't believe Jesus. If someone takes something, someone comes up and says, oh, Luke 24:35, this is going to happen in the future. They're lying to you. Either they don't know they're lying, but to be quite honest with you, most people that say this that have some sort of presence online, they know. They know exactly what it says, and they defend against it, and they're afraid of it. I've confronted people with it personally. They cannot defend it. They can't. And it's so easy for an amateur like me to go up against a Bart Ehrman because it's what it says. And it's so simple that anyone can understand it. And if you understand it properly, just the way that they're saying, the way you're reading it is what they're saying. These people try to confound things and turn it around. And he's a debater too. A lot of these people are debaters. They're bullshitters is what they are. And they're going to try to manipulate you, but they can't do it. They cannot go up against simple fact. And I've noticed this with Bart Ehrman. If you give him a direct fact, a question about a direct fact, he can't answer it. He can't just say yes or no. He has to give you a whole speech because he has to bullshit you and he has to put it in the spin zone. This is why, and all these churches and all these people do the same thing. That's not Jesus. Jesus is relief. He stands and represents the kingdom of God, and that's what the kingdom of God is. That's what God is. It's relief from this world. It's relief from confusion. It's relief from all the things you know that burden you. Okay? That's what this is. It's an unburdening. It's a relief. And once you read it this way, you will see how incredibly simple it is. And then you'll look at everyone else and says, well, how come everyone else doesn't get it? Because they choose to understand it a certain way. They chose their church or their theology over Jesus and God. They made a choice. They think they're Christians. They think they're good people. I'm not saying they're going to go to hell, but they are going against what God is saying. And most of those people know it. They know it and they try to rationalize it some other way. Just like when I'm talking about, I want to do a video with all the people in the books. They got all these books behind them. You see those people? Instead of reading the Bible and saying, Father, what does this mean? What does that mean? They just go and read a book. They read a book. They get something in their head that they like. They put it on their shelf. They do a podcast. And I'm so smart. But instead of going to God and asking, and then them being led to a book or something else, it could be anything, for an answer that God wants to give them, they just go to the book. They bypass God and they go to the book. And then they like to do these videos with all these books behind them. Well, they're so smart, right? Wrong. They're not smart. Unless all those books represent a time God has revealed something based on what they asked. That's the only way out of it. I asked God, I opened this book one day, there it was, I highlighted it, and I put it on my shelf. That's a lot of asking. You could get away with that, but I guarantee you that's not it. That's not it at all. And I could tell. I see them all the time. They do their videos. I know it's preterists. I don't really listen to them, but I'm starting to more. And what they do is they just start reading some books and things start to make sense to them. But they quote the book that they read. That's their understanding, is the book that they read. Or the author or something else. You don't need to do any of that. Everything you need is right there. It's in the New Testament. It's fine. There's all these versions. They're all wrong. Don't worry about it. If you have God, that's your insurance. If you have a relationship with God and you're talking to him and you're asking him, what does Matthew 24:17 mean? I'm not really sure about that. Can you explain that to me? Please help me. He will. And then you'll understand. And you'll understand exactly what I'm saying. So, there is a beginning and an end. Okay? And it's great because everything's just, I don't know what it is. You know a couple verses, you've heard this. Someone tells you something, you associate with what they tell you to, and then that's it. But here you can actually understand. And what Christ is saying and what's happening makes perfect sense. And when you start to read other books and you look at it the same way, it also makes perfect sense. So when you do study, make sure you're sticking close to the words of Christ. Don't just read John and then never read it again and go off somewhere else. No. Read Mark. Read Ephesians. Come right back to Luke. Read Luke. Read Acts. Come back to John. Read Revelation. Come back to Matthew. You see what I'm saying? Always come back to the source. Don't just trail off because you will get lost. Always come back. I've read the New Testament now, I'm not kidding, probably 100 times, okay? The rest of the stuff, maybe 25 times or less. And Revelation, especially the end, the beginning and the end, probably around 100, probably more than 100 times the end, because I'm trying to make sense of it, and I'm trying to relate it to everything else. Stick with the words of Christ. He knows what he's talking about. No one ever came back and said, Jesus said something that we're going to do a little... No, everything is perfect the way it is. It was set down for a reason. It's not going to change. Nothing's changed. Nothing's stopping. There's no stopping. It's once it begins, just like Jesus said, it has an ending. And that's it. The only thing that I've found so far that is still ongoing is Revelation 21 and 22. That's it. Everything else is behind us. But it still relates to what we're doing. The Bible does bear witness to what's happening to you. And there's a lot of lessons to be learned, but there's a lot of lessons to be learned about what the Bible says out there in your life. Okay? But this thing, okay, the kingdom of God, that's here now. It's been here for 2,000 years. It's about you understanding, about you getting it. Okay? Do you get it? Good. Now you have relief. Now you're going to get relief. You're in the world, but you're apart from the world. God, in his kingdom, protects you. He puts a force field around you. Do you understand? You're protected. You're good. You're still here. You still got to put up with everything and all the horrible things happening. And you have to watch other people do these horrible things and not get it. But you just have to. Okay? This is not a cult. This is not some Christian church who they just want more members. That's why people say the things they do, because they want you to join their church. They want to increase the amount of people that are in their congregation. That's all they care about. And they use Jesus and God to make you feel good, to make you feel like you're doing the right thing. But you're confused, aren't you? How confused are you? Everyone's confused. And people don't really see what's going on. And people that are really, really good at it, they're really, really good at memorizing what they've been told. I don't think anyone has ever really read the Bible, the New Testament. Let's just stick with the New Testament. I don't think they're actually reading it. I don't think they've actually sat down and read it page to page, beginning to end, and then start with another one. Because the way they talk, it doesn't make any sense. It's like they've never, like this teacher, when trust me, I was that guy. I didn't do my homework. I'd go in there and I thought, oh yeah, blah, 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 blah. Well, guess what? Teacher's like, you didn't even read the book, did you? You didn't do anything. You didn't even read the cliff notes of the book. Or I can tell you, watch the movie about the book. They can always tell. And I can always tell. After all this time, it's really easy to sit back and listen to these people talk and say, I don't think this person, they haven't read anything. Or they don't see it. Do you understand? They don't see it. They're blinded before they even come in. They're reading it based on how they were taught. So they're not actually learning anything. They're not actually listening. They're talking, they're asking a question, but giving you the answer before you even give them the answer. They ask and answer their own questions. So that's why I don't think they're reading it. Because what's in there is so simple. And I'm indoctrinating you, okay, when you read it. When you read it this way, from the beginning to end, you can encapsulate it like the Olive and Apocalypse. You can encapsulate it. Beginning to the end. Go to Mark, go to Luke. Go to Luke first. Then go to Mark, then go to John, then go back to Matthew. You'll see it has a sequence. When you read Revelation, forget about all the dragons and stuff. Maybe just read the beginning and the end. Read 1, 2, 3, and then read 20, 21, 22. The separation, the judgment. You go back to Matthew 25, you'll see these. It all has a sequence. It all lines up. Once you read it, you'll see it. It has a beginning and it has an end. And you'll see, time-wise, dative, you cannot move anything out of this timeline from basically 70 AD. Because the events, that's why you have these partial preterists. So I only believe in partial. Well, that's because they're taking a part of it and moving out of that timeline. And then they do this and they just keep moving it around. And it's like you're back up in the atmosphere again, in space. And there's no beginning and there's no end. And you'll see when you read it this way that there is a beginning, there is an end, and you cannot move these things out of place. And that's what I think the Bible is designed for. It's a puzzle and a riddle and an enigma. And it may not make perfect sense, but I will guarantee you, if you read it, someone that comes along and tries to take it out of context, they try to move it out into something that it's not, it's very easily noticeable, very easily. And when you'll say, well, how about, let's go to Luke 21. What does this say? Oh, that just means something else. A lot of times they'll just sit there and they'll go, oh, okay, Luke 21. Okay, everyone have a good day. Bible study's over. Or they'll blast through it. And they'll use some weird world. It's like a word salad. Okay, it's like Kamala Harris is there giving you Bible lessons. They'll step out and be like, oh, excuse me for a second, someone's going to come in and substitute. Then Kamala Harris comes in and blah, 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 blah. Okay, bye. It's probably what she's doing for a living right now, because it doesn't make any sense the way people are explaining it this way. Read it for yourself in this manner. Just keep in mind, there's a beginning and there's an end. It all flows one direction. Everyone else is talking about it. Paul is the big one. Everyone says, oh, Paul's saying something else. He's not saying anything else. When he talks about the coming, the parousia, it fits in that timeline. And I'll give you another little hint. That parousia event, if you look at, I think it's Luke 17, towards the end, you will see, they'll say, in that day. And you'll notice people are leaving. They're leaving. They're seeing the abomination. They're seeing Luke, or they're seeing they're seeing the Roman army. Okay, and this is the day the Son is revealed. On that day, the one who is on the housetop, whose goods are in the house, don't go down. People that are in the field, don't turn back. Remember Lot's wife. Okay, and then I'll tell you on that night. Now see, day and night. During the day, so the days of Christ, the Son of Man, are like the days of Noah. That's overall. The day you see the abomination of desolation. Okay, here it will say, here that term is the day that the Son of Man is revealed. That's Luke 17:30. Okay, so that's the revealing. That's the sign. It's the Roman army. Time to run. Those are the people that get out. These people are just like Noah. God told Noah to build an ark. That was their escape. Okay? They were warned beforehand. They were told. They were put in there. They were safe. With Lot, talked about Lot here. I won't get into the Q source and all that, but Mark doesn't talk about it. But here, they're talking about Lot. Okay? Lot, get out of here. Okay? His wife looked back, turned to salt, whatever. But he got out. That was their message. Jesus is telling them beforehand. That's why you keep hearing, be on your guard. I don't know when it's going to happen, but it's going to happen in your lifetime. 40 years later, but it happened. Okay? That's how long it took. That's how long God gave these people after they've been told. You got 40 years to get it together. Okay? One generation. That's what people equate it to. Then that's it. And when he gave them that time, the Son of Man will be revealed. That's the sign. Okay? Let's get out of here. And they're out of here, right? But then you go to 34, on that night. Do you understand? Like a thief in the night? A night? Look at this passage, Luke 17:34. When you start to read the Bible, you start to understand things like this. You start to say, what's this? These people have already escaped, and it's that night. And it's still around, it's that night. It's the night that the abomination of desolation came, the sign of the Son of Man. Okay? On that night, there will be two in one bed. One will be taken, and one will be left. That's what most Bibles in English say. But you'll also notice words like that don't make any sense. What this taken really is received. One is received. The other is aphemi, alphiemi. This is future tense in Luke. I think it's alphiemi, just future tense, because he's talking in the future. One will be taken, one will be left. Left is like cast off. Okay? One will be received, the other will be left behind. Okay? This is in a different situation than it's saying over in Matthew. Okay? These are the type of things that you will start to see when people tell you, like in Matthew, they'll say, oh, this is judgment. One will be taken, that's the bad person. One will be left, that's the good person. Left in Jerusalem, they're just surrounded by the Roman armies, dummy. What do you mean they're going to be left there? If they're left there, they're dead. If they're taken, they're all going to die? What are you saying? With passages like this, you can see that it doesn't make any sense. One will be received, the other will be left. Left where? Inside Jerusalem, surrounded by armies. What do you think's eventually going to happen to them? The vultures are and the buzzards are going to come and eat them, right? It's pretty simple, but that's a Greek language thing. These Bibles are not perfect. Just read it. And if you're not clear, ask God. Because the people that write these books don't want it to be clear. They don't want it to be simple. If you could read Greek, it'd be very, very simple, but it's not. And along the way, they have twisted and turned these passages around. So basically, when you go to church and you say, oh, Father, Pastor, what's this mean? And then, they rise to the occasion. And they complete the brainwashing. They complete the manipulation. This only takes you halfway there. This just confuses you enough to say, I don't understand what this means. But then you go to church and it completes it. Now you're brainwashed. Now I understand. But what you understand is dog crap. You don't understand anything. You understand the lie that they told you. Maybe. But if you just read it. And honestly, I mean, what are you doing anyway? You're not doing anything. You could read a page. You could read a chapter a day. I'm an idiot and retarded. How many times I've been hit in the head? I got a lot of brain damage, and I can read it and I can understand it. It's not hard. It takes a little time. Practice makes perfect. If this is so important to you, you'll do it. And when you do it, just understand that there is a beginning and there is an end. And you'll find it. And you'll find everything just flowing down river. A big, mighty river. Like the mighty Mississippi. Okay? It's going one way. And that's it. If anyone comes along and says, oh, Paul's saying something different, Paul's not saying anything different than Jesus. And even if he did, who are you going to choose? Jesus or Paul? Paul said it best. Are you of Paul? Are you of what was Apollos? Or are you of Christ? Okay? I don't think Paul is saying anything against Jesus. People are saying that it is because they're taking things out of context. They're really, you're getting like this right here. But you got to look at it. You got to look at the whole thing. And when you do, you'll see beginning and end. It's flowing one way. It's simple. It really is. And you also notice Revelation, all these sequences as it goes along. You say, wow, this is the same sequence in Revelation or in chapter 24 of Matthew. And you look at Revelation. Wow. Here we are in Matthew, the separation. Here we are with the separation in Revelation, the end of 20. And you'll see that they line up and they have a sequence. And I think this is done, again, on purpose. So you won't necessarily understand everything, but you'll understand the important parts. Jesus said what he said. It did happen. And anyone that says anything else is a liar. You match up with what he said was going to happen in Revelation 21 and 22, the new heavens and earth. If you want to say, well, the heavens and earth is total destruction. There's no destruction in Revelation. Where does it say the entire earth, planet Earth, is burned up and destroyed? It just says heaven and earth fled away. And there was a new heavens and earth. Fled away, in the Greek, that just means hid away. I think hid away, fled away, ran away. It ran away from them. And there was a new one on earth. That's just a new atmosphere. Okay? It's a new surrounding. It's a new idea. It's a new concept. Okay? It's a new regime. It's the same, but it's different now. It's better. It's much better. So I hope this helps when you read the Bible. Just understand that it's not confusing. You're being confused because people want to confuse you. So you'll be stupid and you won't know what's going on around you, just like our government. They love to do this with the taxes, the tax system. They just love to make things complicated and confusing so they could screw you over while you're working 60 hours a week. Okay? Your church is no different. It's just human beings taking advantage of other human beings. They're better at the system. But what they're not better at is keeping you down if you want to know. So if you want to know, go to God. Go to God, ask Him. If you can't do that, then you're just wasting your time. You might as well just become an atheist and start watching, I don't know. It's a basketball season now. Football's over, isn't it? Just watch basketball and watch TV. Don't waste your time. Because it's not going to happen without God. God is your insurance. God is your policy. Okay? It doesn't matter if you're right or wrong. It doesn't matter. You're insured. And He'll understand. He won't understand if you start chopping up your competitors in the drug trade. But if you don't understand something, He's not going to hold it against you. Because he knows. He's like, okay, he didn't get that. But he or she didn't get that. But I don't care. I want them to understand this. And they get that. Nobody's perfect, but they're good enough. And that's what this is about. It's not about even being perfect. Are you getting it? Do you have the right attitude? Do you see what I'm trying to tell you here? Because that will shape your attitude. That's what God wants. A good attitude. Someone that He can work with, someone that will just trust Him and do what He says and not give Him a hard time. So have fun reading and just do it. Just read a chapter a day. It gets a lot easier. And you'll know. And you'll have the relief that you already have. You just don't know it. You just don't realize it. So when you realize it, it makes it a lot better. You start to understand things and it feels great. Take care.